Translation and adaptation of the original video for English-speaking audience was made by me, Dmitry of Value Cars, Australia. All rights to the original content belong to Klubny service channel, and the source video link is provided in the description of this video with my thanks to the original authors. Please always keep in mind that my channel has no political affiliation, and I do not tolerate any racist or political statements in the comments to my videos, as all we discuss here are cars, that's it. Any political statements get deleted immediately and their authors get banned without any warning or hesitation, so please do not violate the community guidelines of my channel. Thank you. In the first part of our translated Tank 500 review, we've spoken about the car in general, its size, design, interior and high-level features. In this part 2, we've disassembled Tank 500 and we'll talk about its engine, body-on-frame, variety of materials used in its construction, sound insulation and certainly the whole underbelly that will be very interesting for people who have plans to maybe take this massive beauty off-road. Let's start by taking a swing at one of the well-established and outdated stereotypes that claim that Chinese manufacturers of pretty much any product, including cars, can't come up with anything interesting on their own, only cheaply copying products of other brands and foreign manufacturers. Ilya here doesn't agree with that after looking at this particular car, Tank 500, very intimately. Yes, Tank 500 uses a lot of non-Chinese parts and elements, including some design and mechanical solutions, but it's all put together in China still. Let's take a look at the engine bay. You can see a large battery here because it powers China-made V6 petrol engine. Here we can see the radiator, and if you have a keen eye, you will also notice that it's all supplied by not one, but two fluid containers. And Ilya might get back to explaining to us why there are two of them. This engine is a bi-turbo engine, aka it has two turbines. We can see elements of this construction made of aluminium, and the air is supplied to each one of these turbines separately. Further over here he is showing to us two intercoolers, which is a common apparently mechanical solution for European brands of cars, not for Chinese ones, which was first point that surprised Ilya over here. On the right hand side he is pointing out a rather large air filter, two control modules, electronic control modules, with a small converter module that basically reveals a tiny bit of a hybrid operation of this vehicle. So it's not purely a petrol car, believe it or not, even if it's not advertised as such. We have a separate battery in the boot that he will show us a little bit later, converter over here in the engine bay, and underneath where he's pointing, there you'd find a starter for the generator. As far as the engine power is concerned, this engine is a deforced for Russia engine, so reduced in its power. It apparently pumps out about 299 horsepower, while in China it's a little bit over 360 horsepower. So pushing this 70 horsepower difference roughly, which is noticeable according to Ilya. This is not a simple engine. It's a relatively new method of assembly for Chinese vehicles where there is a combined injection here scheme, Atkinson style, in case it tells you something. So technically it's a rather complex engine, which can be, criticized from the perspective of a long-term mechanical service and upkeep, but Ilya is not going to go deep into that. With this kind of bi-turbo petrol engine, we'd probably expect the fuel consumption of about 20 liters realistically per 100 kilometers in the city traffic. But Ilya here doubts that it would bother some who forked out this kind of money to get this car, at least in Russia these days, and we'll get back to this at the end of the video. Wait, in case you're holding your breath waiting for Ilya to find something to criticize properly, he has found something for us. Can you see this ugly, kinda out of place horizontal pipe with holes right across the engine bay? It serves no other purpose to just hold all these bits and some plastic together. So here you go, some design ugliness is present. You are very welcome. Starting to look at the insides of Tank 500 here in the boot area. On the right over here, kind of in the wall, we see some modules that are controlling the interior heating, air conditioning, and it contains a fan as well. As the car is so massive that it's logical to assume that there will be some dedicated module like this one to ensure there is proper air circulation and heating. If you are somewhat familiar with the European cars, how they are made and assembled, for example Audi Q7, looking over here, you would immediately notice that Tank 500 has a lot of electronics comparatively to some other models that Ilya has taken a look at the Chinese vehicles. Maybe not as much as Audi, he says, but plenty. Take a look at this battery over here in the boot. That's the part of the hybrid engine elements, the hybrid sort of bits that he talked to us about when he showed us the engine. Looking at the body of the vehicle, as it is a body on frame, which is why having some extra reinforcement is not as necessary as in cars that don't have a body on frame. We can see basically only one of those horizontal reinforcement bars over here. Solid frame that this body is placed on effectively structurally is reinforced just by that frame underneath that he's going to show us a little bit later in the video. Sound insulation is basically absent according to Ilya over here, and it is because we first of all deal with the body on frame construction, which is always riding much quieter than the cars that don't have that kind of frame underneath. It is because in this kind of construction, the body rests on rubber padding that separates it from the carrying frame, which absorbs certain amount of vibration and suppresses a lot of noise from the road. Now let's talk about the electric wiring and some of the electronic elements of this vehicle, starting with how the wiring is wrapped over here. For example, everything is very neat, wrapped very tightly and bound to specific fixture points using these plastic clips, China made, which Ilya is saying are probably the only potentially weak point of this assembly. Quality of the welding seams cannot be criticized here, according to Ilya. It's all made very, very well, certainly not worse than any of the Japanese or European counterparts to Tank 500 would have these days. To balance the good and the bad, and not to shy away from showing you what's not done well, looky here. How the window line of the rear panel matches up with the door frame. And you can see clearly the jump here in the level, right? We don't even need to split hairs here and be pedantic to see this rather messy bit of assembly. There is no other way of putting it. No idea how and why this would happen, but the fact is the fact. It's in front of us. And before you tell me this is just maybe this particular unfortunate Tank 500 vehicle that we're looking at, Ilya says that they had two cars delivered to Klubny service for review. You might have seen both of them briefly caught on camera at the very start of this video, and both apparently had similar assembly inaccuracy with these not leveled properly molding lines, which just raises eyebrows. It honestly does. It clearly is a systemic issue at Great Wall Motor assembly line when it comes to Tank 500, which is disappointing. Let's talk about passive defense here, protection of the driver and the passengers. So we're taking a look at first at the front doors. It's a pipe-based, sort of nothing very special, nothing too amazing reinforcement inside of the doors. But Ilya expresses hope that Chinese manufacturer probably calculated the chances of serious damage being done in case of a side collision, which, fair to say, most of these taller and longer vehicles are most afraid of, side collisions. Tank 500 has apparently a rather solid door thresholds, yeah, that are closer to the frame, and that's probably what GWM is betting on here in terms of the main, let's call it side rib of protection in case somebody actually truly hits you from the side. What I didn't like is the quality of plastic pretty much everywhere, and that's pretty much the impression of Ilya here. Ilya already mentioned fixtures, yeah, and any other plastic fittings, any of those clips that he refers to as clips, they are clearly not designed by GWM to be ever removed, or as part of a service, or for aftermarket customization, or some sort of installation, such as customizing the sound insulation layers. Their workers at Klubny service are apparently very, very experienced, and we have seen them at work many times, so there is no reason for me to doubt it. But apparently even they struggled here quite a lot, working very hard not to break anything. But even when the tiniest impact or scratch kind of happens with any of these plastic surfaces or elements, straight away you can see it, and straight away there is a threat of actually breaking something. Yeah, without anything even being done yet, any custom sound insulation being done, the car is straight away feeling much quieter in its factory state, bare bones state, before any of those aftermarket additions. Why? Well, because actually there is some standard sound insulation here, and it's made in the interior of the vehicle using European, German or Swedish approach, where we are looking here at this kind of pressed rubbery plastic layer that one would say produces an acceptable result for an average Joe or Jane, even with a bit of money, who want to ride the car around and not bother with any aftermarket installation. Now, looking underneath the car at some specific mechanical elements that would be of interest to many off-roaders in our audience who would have sufficient amount of money to buy this, to get the luxury, as well as hoping to get this 4x4 capability. Let's actually very seriously talk about this, and please don't miss out on the summary at the end, because it will be interesting for you, I promise. In the front here we see solid, rather large supporting levers, hinges, and a lot of bolts supporting the wheels. At the top is an A-shaped lever that is disappointingly made of aluminium, while a lot of these parts are made of cast iron, which is probably the only bad news that in Ilya's opinion one would actually notice here if one looked closer. So long-term use, aluminium versus cast iron, I don't think we need to be geniuses here to understand what he means here. Now he's demonstrating to us a simple way to determine how much actual give, how much actual movement does the front suspension have by placing his fingers essentially between the supporting beam and the top lever. And what you see is what you get here in terms of expecting for this thing to have free movement space up and down if required during your off-roading adventures. AKA, not much. Doesn't look like there is much. Now we're looking at the oil filter here at the bottom. And while at the top of this vehicle many parts, including the engine components, were appropriately large for this massive engine, for this big car, this filter appears to be very small for this kind of engine. And Ilya thinks that his educated opinion is that if he was looking after this car properly, he would personally look after this filter and replace it a lot more often than some other cars would need to, because just to make sure that nothing happens to this complex, possibly sensitive, China-made, not particularly well-known V6 engine. Now let's focus on the frame of this vehicle. We all know what a frame is. It's basically two essential side beams, long beams on the sides connected by a few, sometimes, or couple at least, of beams in the middle horizontally. Here we can see that some of these elements are connected by welding and some of them are bolted. AKA, those elements that are bolted are intended to be removable in case a mechanic, for example, needs underneath access to certain lower levels of the engine, lower elements of the engine, to replace something such as transmission, such as some other elements over there, without needing to take off the whole body from the top, which apparently is very inconvenient, and according to Ilya, how some of Land Rover models are handling this, which is very, very inconvenient. Now Ilya measures roughly the space between the welded elements versus the bolted elements of the frame, and he kinda thinks that 1.5 roughly meters between those hard welded points is a little bit of a stretch, and it's a bit ambitious, aka they are too far away from each other, which might raise some concerns in terms of how truly solid this whole frame is. This is here the electric motor powering the steering. It's rather large, but hanging pretty low for a 4x4 off-roading adventures. There are elements of cast iron over here and some more lightweight alloy in some other areas, not cast iron. All of this hangs low and is not particularly protected and looks a little weird for a vehicle that positions itself as a heavy and luxurious 4x4. Let's keep looking further down here, and we see the 9-speed automatic transmission block, lots of cooling pipes that are coming to it, and all of that reminds Ilya apparently of Suzuki Grand Vitara, where these elements are realized similarly to Tank 500 apparently, and all that stuff gets typically very heavily serviced or replaced at about 80 to 90 kilometers on the road mark. And now Ilya is pointing out how Tank 500 implemented exhaust pipes for its formidable EA V6 engine, not V8 unfortunately. So here is the right hand pipe and here is the left hand pipe over there as well. In Japanese cars apparently the whole thing is realized differently, where the two initial pipes exiting the engine area, engine bay, merge into one and take all the exhaust required all the way towards the back. Here GWM had a similar idea maybe, as the pipes eventually do merge together in this central chamber, but we see some welded seams over here where the pipes merge, and one pipe comes from the back and another pipe is sort of kind of stuck into it from the side. So that apparently amazes an experienced mechanic that he definitely is, and we'll just have to take it for what it is and feel more educated, I suppose, as I personally do not know if what's shown to us is a bad thing or if it's an irrelevant thing, perhaps. One very good thing, according to Ilya, is the actual rear driving beam and suspension, how it's all made in a very traditional, solid way. There is plenty of amortization give on the sides, classic construction that he's pointing to us here. What Ilya likes is that it's all very simple and very easy to understand and fix if something breaks during very heavy use or off-roading adventures if required. We can see that the lower point of where the suspension piston is fitted to the frame supporting the rear wheel is quite actually low. So Ilya here advises that if you were to take Tank 500 properly off-road, you know, hopping on the rocks or whatnot, you would need to be careful with the rear wheels on rough terrain, as it would be easy to catch with this bolt something with this bolt area and tear it off. Saving grace here, if you can put it that way, is that Land Cruiser has a similarly placed low fitting point, and somehow not many owners complained about it over time, which means that it might look scary but work fine. Look at this particular beauty. The top versions, the top models of Tank 500 have 19-inch, very shiny, very, you know, bling alloy wheels. The slightly lower versions of Tank 500 would have 18-inch alloy wheels. It's all very chromed up, and Ilya can't help but make fun of how short-lived this shine might be in rough weather conditions across Russia or wherever it is that you'd be using this car. Forget Russian snow for now. How about sand somewhere in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates? I'm sure it would be just as heavy a use for these kind of cars, for these kind of chromed up wheels and all of those lower hinges. Yeah, something to keep in mind, perhaps. Spare wheel is placed under the boot and underneath the car. And Ilya here makes fun of it and suggests that if you are truly off-roading somewhere and aren't placed as conveniently as the car is currently lifted for filming purposes, you will have real trouble to extract this wheel to replace a, you know, to put a spare on, for example, where the help is not available, where you are in the woods somewhere, and you would want to have a few harsh words with the car designer who didn't leave the spare on the rear door, hanging on the rear door, as majority of large 4x4 SUVs do it. Especially if the boot door opens sideways, as it does in this case of Tank 500. Why not just leave it on the door, GWM? It would have been so much better. This is such a massive design flaw and omission. So let us summarize. What do we think about Tank 500? Well, according to Ilya once again, but I agree with him, it's a good vehicle that appears to be overpriced very heavily for the territory of Russia, and it remains to be seen just how bold/greedy GWM would go when the car, if the car hits the market in Australia. I certainly hope that it happens at some point. Everything has its price, and you do get what you pay for. Problem is that in this case, this famous saying doesn't properly work, as we're looking at a very good vehicle that one needs to overpay for, according to Ilya's estimation, by about 30% more than it's worth. He says that it costs about 6 million rubles right now, and he would pay fairly about 4 million for it right now. So you can do your currency calculations. I've given you enough information here in case you're interested. So use this math and logic how you like. This car is not a real, true 4x4 off-roader. It's an off-road capable vehicle. But you saw that very limited vertical give of the frontal suspension that Ilya has demonstrated with his own fingers to us, you will probably agree that this is not really built to handle any properly serious off-road, as opposed to, for example, what we've seen with Tank 300. Ilya says that he wishes the car had a V8 engine to have more power and pull for this very heavy body on frame to move more confidently. Interior, we saw in the previous video. If you haven't watched it, why not? Just click the link in the description or maybe in the card that I'll put on the screen and take a look at that video. It's very interesting. Plastic elements are not great all over the place here in Tank 500, starting from the boot and finishing with some other elements, but everything else is rather gorgeous, very rich, and yet again confirms the final summary point that Tank 500 is amazing and a true threat to Toyota Land Cruiser 300 if this car ends up being priced fairly wherever it is released into the market, which sadly isn't the case for Russia, but there is still hope for the Australian release sometime in hopefully not so distant future. I do sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this translated video, and if you did, please give it a like, as it takes you only 1 second and serves as your silent vote for the type of content that you appreciate on my channel. It's the main way for you, other than commenting below, to tell me that you are enjoying this content. So do that and subscribe for more, and I will talk to you next time.